Welcome to the MIT IT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Innovations in Times of Disruption. My name is Priya Dhawan, and I'll be a moderator. I work as the Head of Collaborations, Branding, and Outreach at the MIT ID Innovation Program, and I'm excited to be hosting the session today. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Amit Salvi. Amit works as a senior scientist at Tata Research and Development and Design Center, TRDDC, TCS Pune. He has earned his master's in aerospace as well as in mechanical engineering from University of Michigan, USA. Amit has worked in the area of academic research and industrial innovation for past 2 decades across various industries in the field of aerospace, automotive, energy, defense, biomedical, surgical, tissue culture, and more. Currently, he's working across domain of materials and computer science in the area of knowledge engineering, which is at the core of industrial AI. Before we proceed to listen to Mr. Salvi, I have a few updates to share about the session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. First, today's webinar will have the speaker share his insights, interspersed with questions as we move along towards the end of the webinar. If you have a question for a guest speaker, please feel free to share it via the chat mode. Please set the chat mode to everyone. If we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will surely follow it up with answers offline. This webinar will be available after the session on our various social channels, and future webinars will be accessible through the same link that you're using now. We'd like to encourage you to share today's webinars and its learnings with your social networks. This curated series on innovations will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Mr. Amit Salvi, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. For those who are not aware, MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. The one-year innovation program, which is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global political, social, economic, and technological scenario. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker, Mr. Amit Salvi. Amit, thank you for joining us this evening, and I'm truly looking forward to understand your journey and to see that, how our participants can, with your insights that are going to be shared, learn more about it. Over to you.
So good afternoon. My name is Amit Salvi, and I am a researcher working for last almost 2 decades. And fundamentally, I would say these are a good time for us. Okay, so whenever things are undergoing a lot of disruptions, I think this is a great time for new innovators. And essentially, it basically offers you a great opportunity to look at things a little bit differently. It also sort of creates, it kind of allows you to move away from the stagnant methodologies and sort of re-innovate yourself. Okay, but then a lot of these big companies essentially they are not able to handle this disruption times, and then they are in a constant for last almost a decade because of a lot of disruptive technologies. So they are constantly trying to undergo some change at their end and trying to be relevant. And the cases of Kodaks and things like that. With the invent of digital camera, they pretty much perish very suddenly. So going forward, a lot of these companies are trying to see how they can be relevant in coming time. At the same time, a lot of young innovators are also looking at how they can take this opportunity to basically grow. Okay, so typically, I think the disruptions is a way of life. It's just that currently they're happening a lot faster compared to what it was earlier. And of course, there are man-made versus natural. There are disruptions happening in the social side, the economical side, the technological aspect, in the biological aspect. What we are going to see and they're all interconnected. So you see with this coronavirus, pretty much all of the researchers are in some mode to sort of work on the social, the economical, technological aspects of it. A lot of people are trying to see how much damage it has caused, but many people are looking at it as an opportunity to go for it. Essentially, what it does, it brings an equilibrium, is a change in the equilibrium. Now, typically, what do you mean by equilibrium? So there's a simple price versus quantity curve. Let's say you should say that, and then you say that okay, it has moved from S0 to S1. There's a new equilibrium. But if I know already how it is going to look like, then life is all good. But fundamentally, nobody knows what that new equilibrium is. So they'll have to recalibrate everything. So how do we go about it? I'll just in this talk, I'll just give a very small theory about how typically we look at things, and coming forward, how the world is trying to adapt this theory in practice through a digital format, basically. Going back, what we see, the entropy is going to be the part of them. It was already there. So you see a lot of high disorder and a lot of high randomness that will come into picture. And so how do we basically go through all these things? People are seeing that once they get an education, by the time they come out, the education itself has been irrelevant, or what they learn in the classrooms are not relevant. What your expertise is today, that is basically becoming absolutely redundant in a very short period of time. So fundamentally, the way we define is things are, we define it in terms of ontology. So you can just take a look at ontology in just Google it or in library. So basically it's kind of a philosophical theory of just being. What I mean by that is how certain things do exist or are basically a part of reality. Now, this is a very abstract idea, and some of the advent of that basically started from a lot of religious backgrounds. Advaita Vedanta has mentioned it thousands of years ago. How it is relevant for us. So let me explain this in a very simple thing. So let's say I want to know what is the ontology of a pizza. So what does pizza consist of? Okay, it has a base, right? So that base essentially consists of what are the ingredients of the base. So it could be some flour or some multi-grain flour or something like that, or it will be a type of a base. What is the type of a base? You say it's a thin crust, it's a regular or deep dish, or so on and so forth. So when I mention ingredients, suddenly you see there are some 8 or 10 options in there. When I say type of a base, there could be 3 or 4 options in there. And this is where the list ends. The next one is a sauce. So you could say I have a veg sauce or a non-veg sauce. And within that, you could have, again, mention 2, 3 different types of options in there. Then you move on, you say I have toppings, they are veg or non-veg toppings are there. Then you say the type of cheese that you have. And once all those things are there, we just put it in the oven for some time, for some temperature. Okay. Now, based on all the options that are available to me, let's say I have some different, say, total 5 types of bases, 2 types of ingredients for the base, 5 types of veg sauces, 7 types of non-veg sauces. So with all the options, I may get some kind of a, say, 1,000 combinations of that. Okay. And the structure starts to look a lot more like a hierarchical structure like this. So things made up of things that are made up of things, and so on and so forth. And now you can remember that this is just about what the product, the pizza, is made up of. So when you think in a design terms, you just say, I'm going to do a product development. It is purely in terms of what that product looks like. Okay. But you can bring in a lot of things there. So how about these 3 things? Where is my pizza shop located? Is it then how can you write a ontology for a location? So you could say, oh, it is located in the residential area or in the office area or in the mall or in a college campus. How it is it? What are the competitions? Are there any burger shops or ODP shops or some other restaurants that are there? How do people transact? Do they use cash on, or card, or what kind of crowd that is there? Then time, at what time they are open? Are they affected by some regional holidays or festivals or things like that? So when you write all those things in there, you basically think about what is the header at the top and how many ingredients that you could bring in. Suddenly this thing starts to look a lot more complicated. And these things, we do it all the time. Okay. It's just that these are done very subconsciously at our end. When you say somebody says I'm an expert, he really is not able to define why he is an expert. because all those things are basically done very subconsciously, right? So let's take an example of a classical pin, right? So how do you define that pin in terms of what are the ontologies? So typically I would say I have a material for the pin, there's a design, there's a manufacturing, there is a cost, there's a market. So that again I can bring, just a simple example. The material has some stiffness, it has some particularly made, the design has some shape, some size, manufacturing basically done based on some temperature. So again, I'm just giving very few options in there. Now, why this pin is relevant for so many years and the designs have not been changed that much, okay? Because whatever the ontologies that had done, there are hardly any disruptions that has come into picture. Maybe the big disruption is people are using a lot less this paper pins because we are going digital way, okay? So that is where the disruption is basically changing this whole scenario. So when you look at all these things, you suddenly start seeing the entire picture as a cluster, okay? So you see these hierarchies, these circles. So I would say one of the circle is a material, another one is a design, another one is a manufacturing. And within that, there are so many interconnected things. Now, suddenly you will see that when I say temperature, that could affect my material, that could affect my design, that could affect my cost also. So there are a lot of cross-referencing like this. So you see a very complicated scenario evolving. And essentially, this looks a lot more like this, which is a highly complicated, highly evolving. Even a simple systems can be of this, okay? So when you take a snapshot of your design, your expertise, your organization, your process, at any point of time, this would look something like this. Some of these links will be active, as you can see in the bottom picture. Some of this will be non-active. So active springs are shown by these circles. Some of them will be non-active, that they are there, but you are not using them at some point of time, right? So similarly, now you can define a brands in terms of technology or humanity or business or a design. When you use an Apple product, a lot of people are defining that in terms of humanity. It's a looks, it's beauty and things like that. Nobody's really talking about what kind of functionality it has and things like that. But then how do I bring these things which are really very abstract in nature, okay, to the thing? So what does a simple paper pin defines? It says that, oh, it's a very simple, very robust, and it does its job, right? Suddenly you start feeling it has a character. So going back, what this snapshot essentially tells us is a character that a human kind of perceives, right? So that is basically really given in terms of all these ingredients, I would say. So imagine if I come up with a pin that is very like a rectangular in nature, it has sharp corner. Suddenly it may not look that appealing, okay? So essentially what this whole thing represents are dependent on multiple these ontology elements, I would call it, right? So essentially when this thing is going through a lot of time, these networks are constantly evolving. These snapshots are continuously changing. Every organization, every expertise is constantly evolving like that, right? And essentially what we say that when I look at the disruption that's happening in this is either there is a lot of change happening very rapidly and you're able to react to it a little bit late, or I would say out of your 1,000 elements, let's say 200 elements are completely like thrown out of the window, right? For example, you are a delivery system, but in a lockdown, you can't go out. How would you deliver? Okay. So some of these elements get totally thrown out of the window. And then you have to work with what is available, that is with the rest of the things that are available to you. So in this, what happens, three things that comes out very strongly is what the kind of physical assets that you have in the industry or as an individual expert or at an enterprise level. So these are the physical materialistic things that you have. Something will be there, something will not be there in the time of disruption. What are your capabilities in terms of human capabilities? Everybody needs to adapt. What can you learn something new so that you can create more ontology elements that way? You can sort of, then they'll have more combinations available to adapt to the situation. And fundamentally with all those things is what I call it at a very base level is a knowledge of a system. What does my system is able to do? Okay. As an expert, what I can basically give out to the society, which is essentially is a combination of multiple things that we talked about. And then I call it as a part of a knowledge, right? So let me explain what I mean by that. So you see these stars every day in the, in the sky, And then you start suddenly seeing a lot of patterns in there. And then somebody says, whenever these stars look like this, it rains. Whenever something looks like this, it's cold. Okay. So the human basically tend to learn from its surroundings. And that's what we do all our life long, that when we are born with it, we are not born with any explicit knowledge. We don't have even explicit information, but we learn, we adapt, and we sort of start making some kind of a patterns and say that, okay, this pattern is this pattern is this. Okay. So if we can apply the same logic to our organization or to our human expertise, basically it says that, okay, I can do certain things at certain basically times. So this is one explicit way to sort of write down everything, what you want to learn, what your expertise are, how your businesses are working, and then you say that under these scenarios we can do that. And most of the business who are decades old, they have gone through some kind of disruption and they have come out of somewhere or somehow, and they may or may not have things written down explicitly. Okay. So essentially what it does, that data from the system creates a knowledge, and that knowledge essentially allows us to create more data. So essentially I will learn from existing system, I'll tweak something to base of my knowledge. Once I tweak the system, I start seeing new patterns, and then I'll again generate the data. And that's how our human life or this world is basically moving around, right? So essentially things are discovered, they are rediscovered, they are redestroyed, they are rediscovered again, they are recomputed, they are re-implemented or reintegrated again and again. Hence we call it research. Okay. So a lot of things are already there in the pattern, but we sort of come back to it over some period of time. Okay. Now, in the organization, a lot of times there are a lot of changes. Things are not written down explicitly, not captured at an enterprise level, and then these things get lost. And sort of instead of researching, essentially we sort of redo everything all over again. And today's trend at TCS, when we are working, we are seeing a lot of industries are trying to say that, can we at the enterprise level come up with our own knowledge and share that knowledge or store that knowledge and utilize it at some end later on. Okay. For example, let's say I was part of a company and over 10 years I was part of a consulting company, let's say, and over 10 years I learned a lot of good things, and it's time to move on to a next company. So I'm going to get a promotion there. So when I move on, I don't carry any data or anything. I have to, give up my laptop and everything from company A, basically. But what I carry from my previous is the experience. Now, who owns that experience? Okay. So there is a lot of argument amount, because you learned it in this enterprise. So the enterprise has the basically the rights over that intelligence. Okay. Now, so human says that no, I brought a lot of things on my own to the thing, and so there is a debate. But eventually, what happens is the enterprise owns a lot of things in that context, but there is absolutely no way to save that intelligence in their thing, and essentially the person takes everything out and he moves. Okay. So the fundamental part of knowledge is now explicitly people are trying to capture digitally in that. So in an organization, what happens is this knowledge that certain things have been done, we have faced these situations before, or what we could be doing something later on. Essentially, that is at the core of the core of the system, and that can be utilized to great length for these disruptive times. So essentially, how does it look like? Okay, we already have these neural networks in our place. So we have around, say 80 to 100 billion neurons in human brain, and we are able to compute things very quickly. If you go to an expert doctor, he will just look at you and he already has made up his mind that I think he's suffering from this disease or something like that. But if you ask that doctor, how did you arrive at that conclusion, he may not be able to tell, because explicitly he may not be able to write it. What, as a expert in the system, as a designer, as an innovator, as a researcher, or at the enterprise level, what we encourage people is to write down the methodologies that you are basically coming. Since we don't write that, we come up with a great product, but we don't write really down how did we think about arriving at that location. We just say it was an ink string or it was a eureka moment, and that's how things came to my mind. Okay. So this is the same thing that is able to, we are now, let's say there are hundreds of thousands of people, let's say there are around 30 people attending talk, we can all say these numbers, they are all 9, right? The way we compute everything is different, but we can all say that all these numbers, essentially, they represent 9. Okay, so we can arrive at the same conclusion many different ways. The methodology to arrive at that number is different, but we all arrive at that location 9. So what we tend to do, we said, okay, it's 9, move on. But when we really think about how everybody thought about coming to that number, is going to be 30 different ways to arrive at this number, how we computed this number. There will be some people say it was a 4, some people say it was a 9, but we all essentially came to that number. So what we try to say to the enterprise is basically you try to explicitly write down these ontologies, and there are of course a lot of methodologies available to do that, to see how you are thinking and how you are basically adapting to a situation, how you are basically going through the product development process. Okay, so essentially that is what we call as an abstraction. Okay, so the way the schema works, basically we have some abstractions which are something, as we say, it's a very abstract idea, something as a knowledge or a beauty, or you say that dependability and so on and so forth. But they are represent always through an instance. Instance means there is a physicality to it, right? So for example, the science always try to extract abstractions from the instances. I do an experiment, I learn something from it. The learn part is the abstraction part. Okay, but if you look at the artists, they work the other way. They think about an abstraction and they will create an instance. So for example, if you go to a painter's exhibition, he says, today I'm basically trying to convey a monsoon rains, and he'll have like 10 different paintings of basically conveying the abstraction of monsoon rain through some instances. So this is how there's a fundamental difference. I was very curious about to know how the artist and the scientist think, though both are a genius at some level. But this is the basically the correlation between the instance and abstraction that they are working on. It's a type of it's a matter of a perspective from where you are looking and at what you are looking at, right? So for example, instance could be a pizza, it could be an automobile design, it could be art, it could be music or a film. So for example, in the film, how would you define the ontology basically? Okay, so the ontology essentially, if you, for all these instances, if you define ontologies, they will start like an abstraction. So they are number of parts. And what is starts to come out, if you look at some of the patterns in this, suddenly something will start looking, oh, this looks aesthetic, this looks more lyrical, this has more beautiful, or this is more robust, or this is more innovative. You know, that's how we start defining brands, or what is the difference between a Tata and a Reliance? What is the difference between Apple and Microsoft? What is the difference between an actor A and actor B? You know, what is the difference between director A and director B? What is the difference between a sports team and another sports team? Okay, so that's how things were to start to define. But essentially, we start defining things in an abstraction. But what industry does is, knowing this abstraction, knowing this ontology element, for knowing some kind of time, can I come up with my methodology? So I'll use these times and come up with a different type of a pizza for this time. Can I make a pizza in large quantities in a very small amount of ingredients at a very short period of time? I may call it a budget pizza. So I'll say, okay, throw away all the expensive elements. Only vegetables are getting. So try to create more vegetable pizzas out of this. And can I cater to a lot of people in there? Okay. And that's how people are essentially coping up with disruption. They will look at this map, the abstraction level map. They will essentially mute some of these items, because disruptions are in the disruptive times, some of these items are not available to you. And they will add some more things in there that my new learnings, my capability, I can add that. It was not there previously. And then can I cook something up and basically make an instance of it and push on? So for example, let's take a look at a pizza. I would say, okay, you know what, there's no meat, non-veg things are coming, only vegetables and wheat is coming. So can I quickly make some pizza, which is a budget pizza at a very short time, very at low cost, that is available only through this ingredient, and can I make a pitch to that? Ultimately, I'll make a sale, and I'll still keep my operations going. Okay, so that's how people are basically able to recreate this methodology, and this methodology is a snapshot of a process, how it is done, and that has to be highly time dependent. It has to keep evolving. Okay. So then what this looks like, suddenly if you do that, then your brand may start looking, may take a role of some abstract notion. your brand may start looking human or a trustworthy or dependable or beautiful or truthful and so on and so forth. So this is how things are basically defined. So I'll give an example. Ford Motor Company 100 years ago was in the automotive sector. Okay. Then eventually they moved into transport sector, and now they call themselves as mobility sector. Okay. So you see that they say that, okay, I'm great at making cars. Earlier I used to make IC engine cars that were supposed to run on soybean fuel, but that was during the Henry Ford's time. But now they are running on diesel and petrol. Now they are running on battery power basically, and eventually they will run on hydrogen power. Okay. So they said that the automotive segment itself has moved to transport and to mobility. Funny part is the Ford Motor Company and Otis, or the Schindlers of the world, they are also calling themselves they are in the mobility business. So suddenly one has transformed into another, the another has transformed into the one, and that's how scenarios are changing dramatically. At a very abstract level, what we think about, at the very ontological level, what those companies have, what kind of learnings and the knowledge that they have, what kind of new transformations the people can undergo, and with all this concoction, what they can redefine themselves in the coming time. Okay. So if you actually take a look at your expertise, if you're individual, I'm good at this, you know, I'm though part of a MIT School of Design, I'm good at cricket, I'm also good at something else. So how can I bring this thing together, concoct something, and be ready for the coming time? I could also think about what kind of different things I could add to my skill set level, so that I can transform it very quickly in a very short period of time. So that's the way people can think about. I'll give an example. Many of you know China built a 1,000 people hospital in 10 days. Okay, so that's what their claim was, that in 10 days we were able to create this quarantine hospitals for 1,000 people. What did Indians do? We basically converted hundreds of bogies into hospitals in no time. So apparently the number of 6,500 patients can be hosted in 125 bogies, and to convert what bogie, it takes literally less than in few hours. So in 48 hours they were able to convert around 6,000 patient basically. So in around 100 bogies basically. So when you look at how you approach this topic itself, suddenly you say, hey, if you come from a different perspective, I can do that completely. A lot of the real difference is basically between this thinking. People, enterprises who are at that level, they said, okay, let's push through it what we know and try to cut down the time, and let's come up with this. We spend unnecessarily a lot of expenditure, 10 days, you know, we'll be putting a lot of money into this, whereas we can transform with a different perspective on it and transform what our existing assets into some sort of a basically to cope up with the changing time. Okay. So what things are going to, I would say, going forward is, first you write down all your elements, what are you good at, what you can do. First think about how you look at it, that is your perspective of looking at a problem with what you have, what your learnings and everything. You say that what kind of things I could learn additionally to adapt it very quickly. Again, I'm not telling you to take a 6 months course to do something, because by the time you come out of it, things would have changed again. So essential means that how in a very quick time, very quick learnings can I transform myself? And once we do that, what kind of a knowledge I explicitly learn from it, which I can use it for the changing time. Okay. So with this, I'm just going to stop here. And basically, if there are some questions, we can basically go ahead with it. And maybe I'll explain some of the things that I talked about it a little bit more in detail.
Sure. Thank you, Amit. To know a little bit more about your personal journey, I wanted to understand that, when you made a choice to opt for science, was research something that you, had in mind at a very young age?
As I mentioned, it was there. I just came to know about it very late. I didn't know that it is called as a research. So, you could be a troubled child when you're growing up, and you could be successful researchers later on. But
sure.
It just, again, when the times change, you need to redefine yourself, and that's precisely what it is. And I actually spent almost 15 years in the academia, But I closely work with a lot of industries. So what we used to do in the lab, we never thought of that very highly because it was always some experiment. But when you go and be part of the industry, suddenly we realize even like a 0.5% of what I do in my laboratory could make a huge impact in the industry. So that was it. And my journey was like that. My undergrad was mechanical. All my research was in aerospace, civil, biomedical, so on and so forth. Currently, I'm working as a part of a AI, more on the knowledge engineering and materials. But at the same time, I'm working with a lot of social organizations based in Konkan, and I'm doing a lot of medical work there. In fact, I wanted to share something that I've been working for last 2 weeks on development of a sanitizer based on plasma application. So where there is no soap, there is no water, there is no sanitizer actually that we use. And in the lockdown, it is a very interesting case that only chemist shops are open. There is absolutely nothing open. And we were able to create a few boxes that actually cleans this N95 mask, which is a huge problem right now in the hospitals. And we were able to demo it to a lot of hospitals in Pune. And yesterday we were able to travel to Bombay and showcase it to KEM, Tata Memorial Hospital, and Hopkins Institute.
So TCS being a leading player, and then of course, in these pandemic times, all eyes must be on TRDDC, right? So how big is the team at TRDDC?
So TRDDC essentially was a standalone institute. It's under Tata Sons. Okay, it was started in 1984. So they had two main topics. One was material science, because they had a lot of steel company legacy, and the another was software R&D. So TCS TCE, and it was called. So at that, when in 84, many people knew what software research is all about.
True.
But over the period of time, we added, we were actually acquired by TCS, and then we are part of TCS Research now. We have around 39 different areas that work on epidemiology, genetics, epigenetics. Essentially, what we look at is these patterns. So everybody comes from some domain expert. Everybody is some domain expert. So I represent materials. There are people who are doing behavioral sciences. There are people come from genetics. There are people come from data analytics and so. And then we basically look at everything in these patterns, and we try to sort of correlate in the computer science and mathematics parlance, essentially.
Okay. So 39 domains, and then the team strength being?
So total TCS research is around 700 people. Out of that, almost 500 people are full-time researchers, and support staff and everything, and almost more than, probably I would say 30-40% of them are PhDs, so at various levels.
Okay. And where is it located within Pune?
We are at Hadapsar, in the Hadapsar Industrial Estate, and probably in a couple of years we will move to Sayadri Park, at Hinjewadi. So we'll have our own big building and everything.
Okay. And how is the work from home experience coming in? How is the team responding to these?
Very interesting. Some of us had desktops, and so they couldn't move anything there. But it just so happened that it is a very nice break for us, because we had to throw away everything what we were working on and look at it differently. So we had a lot of time to read and things like that. So for us, again, disruptions actually is an opportunity in disguise.
True.
So people have reported that going forward, obviously work from home people want to do that, but it also sort of allows us to work at our own time, because but we had some of meetings in the evening that can go very late at night, and a lot of interesting things may come out. We do learn from each other during coffee breaks and things like that. So so that time has increased quite a bit, I would say. We are not connected to any customer support as of now. We are an independent research entity, but we do some customer support. So we don't have like a 9-to-5 thing that we have to work on.
Okay. Great. So I think we've got a couple of questions here. Just a minute. Yeah. Which one do you prefer is relevant in the present, innovation and disruption scenario? being master of one or jack of all? Arihan Jain would like to know.
Jack of all, always, always.
Fantastic. You want to add further to it?
See, what we have seen, I mean, in last 40 years, we have basically when people do ideally both, I would say, but definitely jack of all trades. What I have observed is my personal observation.
Sure.
When I was young, all the entertainment that we had was books essentially. Televisions were not that rampant and things like that. So we tend to go very deep into the thing, and essentially the education there also was very similar to that you have to go very at a deep level and understand. But if you look at today's generation, right, and they are multitasking on 10 different things. Okay. So the old generation would always, I was like, my generation was like caught in the two ends basically. I have seen phones where you have to put your finger in a rotary dial and do it, and I always wonder why this is the most annoying thing anybody could design, but and the young generation could never understand why was it like this. Buttons are so simple. Okay. So I don't have any answer for that. So we talk. So my father's generation would probably they keep telling the young generation, no, when I was young I would just study for 8 hours straight away, and you are doing 10 different things at the same time. But essentially what we see that is necessary for today's time, but over the period of time I understand that holistic approach or connected through multiple things and coming up with even a simple change, simple adaptation. It may not look very big, but that done in the context of hundreds of ontology elements in the technical parlance could become a lot more successful than just being expert in only one. And it has happened. If you look at researchers who are eccentric geniuses, like Tesla's, I mean, they are very great, but their innovations were not taken. The humanity was kind of missing. And what humanity really defines is then you are able to connect, it's a jack of all trades.
Sure.
Okay. So that is definitely necessarily. But I would say if you are a jack of all trades, you better learn how to sort of take one stream and go down. At least you have to have some understanding of that, some knowledge of it.
Right. Abhishek Gaurav would like to know that how have you applied ontology? Can you give a mention of some specific projects that you have worked upon?
Okay, so our group, not me, but the group that I work with, essentially came up with the problem that came to us. So this also this will define what kind of work we do. Sure. There is a problem that came from very big cosmetic manufacturers. So they are into anti-aging creams. Okay, so it's anti-aging cream is like a $14 billion a year industry. Okay, the problem that is basically there are some kind of a proteins that needs to go through your skin. Your skin will repel anything and everything. So it has to go through that skin and go to the cells, and this is where once the proteins are reached, they get rejuvenated. So your Botox kind of works that way. Okay, but it is not recommended. So the question is that how would you take something through the skin? So when we looked at, there is a lot of the way they do is essentially they will have a group of 100 people, they'll apply some creams to them, and then they say, okay, for 70 people this works. So that's how they will basically design. What TCS did, we actually came up with a computational model, a molecular dynamic model, where we actually said, okay, this part looks like an epidermis, this part looks like a dermis, these are the holes in between them, and we are able to sort of create these molecules, and we can apply those molecules to the skin model, and then we can see the molecules actually penetrating to the skin. And then we realize that if you add really small assistant molecules, some particles, then they are very nicely delivered through the skin. And it happens that we studied a lot of molecules, and it happened that the gold particles below some size will take that protein and will deliver it very safely through the skin down to the thing. So we kind of, in a ontology element, we said that, okay, how the dermis works, how the epidermis works, these are the elements. What is the protein? What is the gold particle? And now we are playing with all these elements to supercomputer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now what has happened? Suddenly it has given a great tool for us. And when we actually compute the dependencies, we say that gold particle below 50 nanometers are great. They will carry anything and everything. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly
Right.
that's what we realized. Then suddenly this L'Oreal was the company. They said, but the Asian skin is different than the Japanese skin, that is different than this. So it's a small change in our ontology elements, and we are able to create the model in like instantly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly we say that no, in Japanese skin you need to do this. Okay. Now again, a lot of trials and things are remaining, but just having a holistic look at things, we are able to look at the ontology elements and say that, you know what, this works beautifully in a simple list of things. So you should rather concentrate only on, you may have 1,000 options, but concentrate on top 5 options, right?
Right.
So that's how things are work, and this is a typical way we are working.
Okay. Okay. Can you share your experiences with disruptions that you handled in your Konkan project for education and medical field?
Okay, so in Konkan, I work in the there is a hospital near Derwent, near Chipurun. Okay, I don't know, many people might know also.
Sure.
So one of the tasks that was given to us was there's a huge rampant malnutrition there. So actually, if you look at, it's a green belt that way, Konkan. You get a lot of rain, a lot of trees are there. It's not like a dry, arid land. But you see a lot of malnutrition. The people are very thin and so after looking at, normally malnutrition program works on giving food, and it just so happened that we realized, we did a lot of study, and we had around 100 to 200 pregnancies every month.
Okay.
And what we realized, the mother itself is basically malnutrition, so she will give birth to a malnutrition child. So then there was 1 year we started, and in the UN there is a program to basically, when the child is pregnant, or when the lady is pregnant, they will start giving her some food. You know, you see these ads for give her a lot of green vegetables, and basically, so essentially we look at folic acid and iron. Okay.
Okay.
After doing that also, we realized there is hardly any change, because data shows that, and then the entire government, this thing was based on that. When we looked at adults and girls, we realized that when the girls are 10 to 11 years old, at that time there is a huge change that's happening in their body. And we started all those basic malnutrition program, the food, the diet program at that age, at the age of 11 and 12. What we did, we get people from almost 900 hamlets, basically. So we started delivering these laddus, which are made up of this high folic acid and ions and things like that, at home. And what we realized, suddenly by the time they are, another 8 or 10 years down the line, when they get married at the age of 21, 22, their offsprings are a lot, I would say, a lot healthier. Okay. Now there is a disruption, because in last 10 years, the social disruption that has occurred is, a lot of these people tend to eat rice, and because it's predominantly rice and coconut based. But the sign of prosperity there is to eat rotis. Okay, so the moment the wheat has started to come into diet, suddenly there are diabetes has shot up like crazy. So now the current disruption that we have is, these people are malnutrition and diabetic. So typically when we say diabetic, they are a little bit plumpy and overweight or this. So we have to be careful about what kind of food we give. They have to be careful about sugar intake. When you are malnutrition, when we are trying to give them sugar and things like that, they are diabetic. So that is a totally different. By the way, this program has been taken by UN to 43 countries right now, and it has been implemented by UN. So this is a disruption. Now we'll have to work around.
Yes, Professor Thakur, is that you?
Yeah.
Sure.
Amit, it would be pertinent for the audience to also know the kind of work you've been doing in the education field with respect to the sports facility. So whatever is available as a capacity in people of a particular area, how that has been brought to the fore by constructive efforts which you have worked on your project.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What?
So I'm talking about the sports facility and the Atal Tinkering Lab kind of
Okay.
activity which you have been doing. How
Okay.
in an area where it is almost people will not imagine that something like that will come. That is a
Okay.
disruption what you have handled and
Yeah.
you've been on that project.
So when I look at education, essentially from this ontology point of view, what I realize is, people are going to school, they're learning something, but pretty much a lot of learning happens outside the school. Okay, that means the times, as I said, the data drives the knowledge and knowledge drives the data. So when we show them a video, it is just an instance. Essentially what we want to understand is what they have learned. Okay, so again you start defining things in abstraction. So to teach them addition, over the last 30 years I realized more and more understanding of what does addition really mean. Okay, and so that through you can deliver that addition through hundreds of different videos. Okay, so you essentially tell a story for you to develop this abstraction. That's how our all Puranas and all those, essentially they all told stories. Okay, and each story is at every different age group will understand it differently. So we started to basically bring this thing in the education system itself. So we want to tell something, but you always tell in terms of a story. You create some kind of a basically schema and you do that. And we develop some digital platform for that. And these are AI based platforms. So what that happens is, because every student is learning it differently, so you have to basically orient it. The schema itself changes as per the he is learning, as per his answers, as per his things. So we are able to sort of create. So one video itself is basically written in ontology element. So if somebody from Orissa logs in, suddenly the background changes, the photo frame in the video changes to say Jagannath's this thing, the colors will change, their names will change. So this is like a on the fly media creation. So that's what we're able to do in the education field. So when we actually looked at, then what we realized, what these people offer are totally different. We cannot be part of a urban environment and I come and say that, oh, I'm an expert in the education field. When I go there, I try to implement my model on them. That is the totally, it has not worked at all. When I go there, I realize that, how little I know about that. So you understand, I use the same schema of ontology, but suddenly the answers that they come out of it are totally different. And I learn out of that. Okay. So this is what we developed, and then we actually developed a huge sports facility there. And fundamentally, we realized that these people are extremely basically adaptable. They're physically fit because it's a very tough environment. Now, how can we reorient that to some of the sports that we are doing? And in the first year itself, there are some girls who are 9-10 years old age, and one of the girls basically took on archery. And in the first year itself, there was a Khelo India that happened, I think, a couple of years ago. She got gold under 16. Then next year, she, I think in 3 months, she went to Bangladesh. She got gold also there, and she was suddenly like world ranked number 160 or something like that. And government gave her almost like 40 lakhs rupees of just a prize for that Khelo India thing. What has happened now? Suddenly, she lives in a village. She can go to Bombay in like 4-5 hours. She can fly out of there, but all the facilities, everything are provided there. He's essentially set for life. So the definition of what the success is and what today's kids basically they read in the newspaper and everything, I would like to sort of say that the definition of success, if you change it, you will see a lot of heroes around you. Okay, so we sort of change that perception. We don't say that if you are really educated and very good, you have to leave your village and come to cities just to make. It doesn't have to be like that. You can do a lot of, and then we started to see a lot of these people are basically getting back into their village mode and doing a lot of great stuff that even urban people are not able to do.
Great, thanks, Amit.
So Anirudh Kenge would like to know, when we look at new innovations during the time of disruption, only big firms or the ones already in market have enough resources and possibilities of taking it to market. How can individual innovators go ahead with their projects developed on a small scale?
Okay, so I'll give you a little background. There's a program called SBIR in USA. It's called Small Business Innovative Research. What they did essentially, when US looked at, and they said that most of the innovation that happens It happens in the companies where the employee strength is 30 people or less. So they said that 99% of the innovation happens in companies which are like 35 people or less, or something like that. If you look at all the companies in the world today who are innovators, okay, so India trying to reach a 5 trillion economy, Apple itself is 1 trillion on its own. Okay, what do? They just make cell phones. Okay, so we have cell phone manufacturers here, and but they are not able to reach to that level, right? So they, with that, they started saying that we will give a lot of funds. They spend almost $2 billion every year to give funds to these small innovators and okay. Fundamentally, what they have, which big companies lack, essentially is the adaptability and perception also, right? So somebody like me, I basically work on both the sides. I have been so our entire CTO group, basically that for which I work from, is been told, okay, stop all the activities, research for your future, because it's going to be irrelevant. Because once we come out of it, all the futuristic business proposition or research is not going to be there. So work only from the perspective of COVID-19, essentially. At the same time, I'm for this Derwent startup, I'm trying to come up with a hand sanitizer based on plasma. It doesn't take water or anything like that. Okay. And the biggest problem that we are seeing, that we went
Sorry, we lost you. Your last sentence.
Okay. So while working with TCS, I'm working at a lot of this industrial level thing, but also with this startup, that Derwent startup that I'm doing, we are basically trying to come with a very cheap, innovative hand sanitizer. So this is again at the bottom of the pyramid innovation. Basically, your mask that we wear is going to be reality for next couple of years. So people will be using that. So how do we basically disinfect those? How do you do that? Now the problem, the obvious problem is if I develop this in TCS, I could go through my CTO, then he could talk to somebody in Delhi and go through that route. At the same time, I know for the fact that making something in a big company is going to take me probably a couple of years to deliver that. Because the moment I say I need to go to the hospitals, people say you cannot. If you are part of a TCS employee, you have to sit at home. You cannot move out. If something happens to you, we are responsible, so don't do it. In the smaller segment, you could actually take those risks. You could go apply for the police pass, you could travel, and do some of this stuff. So a lot of big industries, their perceptions are very frozen, essentially. And this is where you can bring a difference. This whole thing is still pretty new because startups in India are still highly, computer based, because there is hardly any risk involved in that. So I would say something, if you bring in a little bit more risk factor involved, a lot of companies will tend to run away, because especially in India, big companies are very, very averse to risk. They always look at a risk versus reward, so on and so forth. I would suggest one thing, that a lot of companies like TCS and like especially Tata, they actually help a lot of startups, SAPs, to basically come up with their own ideas, and that ecosystem of coexistence is coming to India very strong. And I think from MIT, probably you could also connect to a lot of people in the industry and sort of develop this ecosystem. Government is also doing a lot of good things in there. And I think there was a portal that launched last month, where if you have some novel ideas for Corona, you could directly send like a 2-page write-up on that, and they will go through that.
Yeah, there's a lot coming in from I think AIM as well. So there's a new update on the COVID solutions also on that side.
I will tell you, there are around, what I am aware of, there are at least 20 to 30 ventilator designs that are ready. Okay. The problem is right now the situation, in this current situation, if a ventilator is working, it has a certification, people will just manufacture that in large numbers, rather than coming up with something new that has to go through certification. And medical emergencies are a little bit different. For example, in our mask, in like seconds, we could kill all the bacteria, and we know that will kill the viruses also. But to test that, there is only one institute in whole India. It's called National Institute of Virology. Again, it's in Pune. but nobody is talking out of that. People are working overtime to develop the vaccine. So nobody is going to get any certification from NIV for a virus for next probably 6 months. Okay.
Right.
So those problems are there. Yeah.
Sure. So do we have your permission? We've got like 2-3 more questions.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Although we've reached the end of time, but if we could
go ahead,
continue to answer those.
Okay. Yeah.
So Ananya Kaipa would like to know, a lot of your work is dependent on the demographic and how the people interact with the environment or each other or products. How do you ensure that your research on the ground is sufficient or correct?
Okay. So let me if I understood the question correct. I'll give an example in Derwent. Okay. See what happens typically when the question of human thing comes. Scientists tend to stay away from things. Okay. So there was a big problem if in the rural area was about this pregnancy. So what happened that earlier the world, I think the WHO says that the pregnant child has to be 2.5 kgs and above. Probably 90% of the pregnancies were below that. Okay. So when we implemented the program, the malnutrition, the adolescent child program, we started seeing good results. What we realized that when we were giving them food and other things and medical checkups and some medicine, the in-laws were telling, especially the mother-in-law will tell, in my time nothing was like this. Okay. So this is all, and everything worked out very okay, and this is just an excuse not to do things and so on. So now as a scientist, when I'm there, wearing a trouser and proper things and going out there in the field to collect the data, I don't want to hear in all that. Okay.
Sure.
But we actually connected a lot of social people, the Anganwadi workers, as a part of this program. So this is another ontology element, I would say, that was added.
Correct.
They did an amazing thing. What they said there is some function, we call it Doharjan or like a baby shower there, and the whole family is invited. And we took only, because typically this is a ladies program, so we took the mother-in-law. And when she was there, we actually gave her a mic and asked her to stand on stage in front of everybody and ask her, how are you taking care of your daughter-in-law? Okay. So the story was totally different. She went on a great lens about how she is doing all these things. So essentially, whatever the remedies that we had suggested, she was telling how she is doing that at her end. Okay. So suddenly we know the data that we are getting is basically dependent. So this is where that human element has to come into picture. And like, for example, in TCS, we have a very big group called Behavioral Sciences. They do this all the time. When we are working on smart city projects, I mean, human element has to be there. Otherwise, most of the research, basically, you see that it's not going to last long. That most of the people, the human element is completely missing. They are not taking into account what people want. And this is where you think what people need. So, for example, if you take a case of Tata Nano, it was a great product from a product development perspective, but it was branded right from start as a poor people's car. Whereas if you go to if I'm a poor guy, I don't want to drive something that says is poor. I would rather buy a second-hand Maruti or a second-hand Hyundai, which has for the same cost, and drive that. Right. So that human element was somewhere missing, and this is where there was a talk of relaunching that with a like electric motor and things like that. But by then the brand has so much suffered that So this is where that when the human element kind of goes away, this is what happens.
So you'll always have to keep that bit in mind.
Absolutely.
Right. So Amit Kulkarni would like to know that new research will have to be focused on how to contain the spread post-COVID. So how do we enhance biological surveillance globally? Any inputs on that?
Yeah, see, there are a lot of products like this, but I'll give like a couple of minutes on this whole perspective.
Sure.
For last thousands, this is again my perspective, for thousands of years, we have seen a lot of epidemics that are come and gone. and essentially human immunity basically has been the key, and the herd immunity and so on and so forth. Basically, that has been the key there.
Right.
So how do we basically improve our immunity? And that happens when you basically get the disease, okay? And that's how things basically work. So I don't think avoiding somebody who has that is going to be the case completely. That's going to be there. Getting those diseases at the root itself is, I think, is going to be the major key. So where it has, and then you must have seen a lot of these epidemic movies. They will always try to trace the origins of that. So then they can learn where it has come, and they will know the actions of it. So that is going to be the key. Now the question was about how would you ensure how people have the sort of a monitoring system. Countries like US and China, they are already doing it, knowing or unknowingly. In that Harari book, he talked about that this is the way of life in future. From an Indian perspective, I really beg to differ. The fundamental problem there is in the most of the world is very monochrome, okay? In a sense that they don't have much diversity. So when they get something different, people tend to panic. In India, I think we are so diverse, basically, that we are able to adapt to things much better way. That is there. So, so disruptions, basically, we are fundamentally very good at handling chaos because we love chaos, whereas the rest of the world doesn't love it. And this is where, so you must have seen a lot of innovative things that are happening on WhatsApp. People are playing housey, sitting in the balconies and things like that. So the diversity is basically very good. And in the ontology terms, if you look at as many ontology elements, if you have say more than 20,000 elements to do that, essentially it says that your dependency of one element on the other goes down. It is essentially connected to multiple things. So one simple thing is not going to bring the whole system down. Okay.
Right.
So coming up with those, and there is, of course, there is a uncertainty. We work in uncertainty propagation and what is the robustness and things like that. So there are mathematical techniques in that. So I think that system robustness or that will, I think, play a major role. And I think this will come out of India and go to the rest of the world, rather than investing into the social monitoring things, what the rest of the world is doing. It is going to be extremely difficult at our.
Yes, and I guess there are two more questions, but I guess I would request.
I'm okay with it. If you think they'll make a difference.
All right. So I think I'll request the participants that beyond these two questions, if there are any more coming in, do reach out to Amit offline on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And for now, we've got Amulya Chavda, who would like to know that keeping in view the current situation of COVID, we now know that the new normal is going to be way different from what we had earlier pictured. Yes. I think this question is there on everybody's mind, that how do you look at the future now from an innovation point of view?
See, if I define things, let me just again go back to the ontology thing.
Right.
Essentially, I look at it as a musical chair. Okay. There's a whistle, everybody start dancing, and then the music stops and everybody just grabs a chair. Right. The problem what's happening is this music is stopping too often, too fast, too quick. Okay. So for youngsters to learn something in a very quick time is basically making a difference. Okay.
Right.
Whatever I'm doing has absolutely nothing to do with my education as in the information per se, but definitely a lot to do with the education as a knowledge per se. What I mean by that, typically how the human works, there is a information. So somebody says, mug your table. 2 is 2 is 4, like that. Just mug your table.
Right.
When you grow up, you say, hey, you know what? When I go buy bananas outside, then I can use this table. This is where you develop the knowledge.
Right.
When you use that knowledge in the field, for example, a lot of you will be making some devices for this COVID and things like that. You basically, while making that, you develop experience. And then when you write that experience down, it becomes again some information. So your information, knowledge, experience, that is a triangle that you keep working on. Right. So what has happened is that we have now a lot of information available. We don't have to do it hard way. And because of that, I personally believe that's where the music is stopping too often, and the schema is shifting constantly. Okay,
Right.
so you don't have to spend a lot of time. Information is there everywhere on Wikipedia. You don't have to try to build a knowledge, and when you actually work hands-on on something, you develop experience. So I would say I would rather I don't think I understand 10 different things in AI and everything, but I know I have some knowledge and I have some experience working with this. I would say some diverse experience working with. Definitely, I could sit and take like classes in data sciences for next 3 months and be expert in data sciences. But to become an expert, this is just the information. Please understand the difference between the information and the knowledge. Okay, so that information is always going to be there. Your idea, inspiration will come from people, from humanity, from abstraction. That is always going to be there. Okay, so you have to learn from there and just do search on things. See, there must be a lot of people have done a lot of things, and your eureka moment will come from what people have done and what they have not done, and whether you can utilize that for current scenario. And this is where things will start. And that's what's happening. I mean, you get a homework, first thing you do, you go Google it. That's everybody's doing. This was not there 10 years ago. Everything, all the codes that are there, they are solved. There's a lot of democratization that is happening. So I'll give an example. We have in TCS, we have a democratization of AI. That means we have a lot of codes that are organized that will say, if you give me a picture, it will identify an age. If you give me an image, the code will identify your whether you're a male or a female. It will identify whether you're an Indian or a Chinese or a Japanese or Caucasian and things like that. All you have to do is organize this thing in a drag and drop way and sort of come up with your own code to identify, say, some person or something like that. Okay, so you don't have to rewrite certain things. These are all there, but you need to know how to use it. It will not depend on your idea or inspiration than anything else.
So great time to actually start innovating in, and they have everything around them. It's just about how to make use of each of the resources diligently.
So I mean, one example could be the way the world will react to this and the way Indians will react to this. It will be totally different. Inherently, ours is called Jugaad because it's not very formalized in a way like that. But like I gave an example of this train coaches, right? I mean, people thought about that, and I think it's a great idea to do that.
Fantastic.
But not the rest of the world will always go. So this N95 mask in America right now, I talked to a surgeon and he says we have to use the same mask for almost 7 days because there is a shortage of this N95 mask. In India, people use cloths, cloth mask and various different things. And we are coping it much better than those because we can just wash them. N95, you cannot wash it because it's not made up of it's cotton, basically. So we have to find our own inspiration from our own people around us, basically.
Correct. Great. So I guess with this, we conclude the webinar. Special thanks to you, Mr. Salvi, for your time and sharing your insights and patiently answering all the questions. There are more rolling in, but they will reach out to you offline.
Yeah.
A round of thanks to our participants for joining us today. I'd like to invite you all to our next webinar. Please save the date, 17th April, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Our guest speaker is Mr. Bhushan Patil, ex-Paytm and Angel Fund lead, who will talk about new data for new innovations. Links will be shared on our various social channels. The links have been provided on the chat mode, so please register soon. For those who tuned in late, this curated series of innovations relevant for today will feature a variety of industry thought leaders, speakers like Mr. Salvi, who are a part of the MIT ID innovation ecosystem. MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Institute of Design. And the one-year innovation program is the latest offering of MIT ID, which aims to create a new breed of comprehensive innovators, informed by design thinking, influenced by future technologies and trends, and inspired to make their own mark in the global scenario, be it political, social, economic, or technological. So adios, everyone. Stay connected, stay safe, stay home, and please keep innovating every day. Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you for joining us once again.